It is the Security Weekly Virtual Hacker Summer Camp. I am Paul Asadorian. It is beer o'clock. That's right. So I've cracked open the beers. It's all downhill from here. But keeping us on the upswing is Mr. Paul Battista. He's the CEO and founder of Polarity. Paul, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Yeah, it's nice to have you. I know, it's nice to have you on the show. Now, Paul, you did kind of a survey, asked a question of the security community. Why don't you tell us about that?
I did. We asked, what's more important, speed or thoroughness when it comes to incident response? And, it's one of those kind of age-old questions, even in pen testing or hunting. You know, when you're a pen tester, it's like you got to find all the vulnerabilities, not just the one to let you in. When you're an incident responder, you got to find all the machines that are intruded upon, not just the first
obvious
one to
ones.
be intruded upon. So,
right.
We were kind of curious which one's more important. We understand there's value in both.
And what were some of the results of this survey?
Yeah, so it was pretty even. So we saw decent split. Let's see, it was 42% said speed and 58% said thoroughness, which to us was close enough that said, hey, it's close enough that it's even, and there's a balance. And if someone's focusing on one, they're definitely failing at their job. And this is one of those things that's kind of true to our heart, and kind of what we do at Polarity is trying to help folks with that balance. And there were some interesting kind of comments on the poll as well, like folks that say, straight up came out and said, hey, it's both. There's a balance. In fact, one CISO of a large financial even commented, I'll get the quote right here, given finite time, completeness is a function of speed. And he linked to a Pink Floyd video of pudding versus meat,
right,
as you would expect.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, and I also imagine that the matrix of speed and thoroughness goes a lot deeper than just the two major categories, right? Because having worked in a security organization, there are things that you can do fast, and there are things that take a lot longer, and then there are things that you can do thoroughly, and then things not so thoroughly, and they all kind of intertwine. And that may not be like an overarching statistic. I think is great, but you may be really good at this aspect of your incident response program, but when it comes to web application vulnerabilities or ransomware, there's some things where you fall down in either category, right?
Yeah, I think there's areas where more attention is needed, right? Where you need to be extra thorough. And then there's, those rabbit holes, those kind of areas you dive down and you're distracted, and maybe you shouldn't be down in that rabbit hole for too long. This is where I actually have right here on my desk. I have, if that comes through on Zoom there, I have a little timer I like to flip over and time box myself on some things to 3 minutes and then get back to it. Is it worth going down that rabbit hole further, or should I pull out and get back to the task at hand?
Right, and that's one of the things that as an analyst is super difficult, because you can work off of some kind of indicator and then go, all right, I'm going to start pulling in all this other data. To get this other data, I have to go to these other systems, and I'm all over the place, and you're down this rabbit hole. And sometimes the results are not great, right? And by results, I mean, it could be that you didn't find anything, which is an important finding, right? Or it could be that you did find something and action is required. And just being able to quickly go down those paths, I think, is really something that, Polarity can certainly help us with, right? Because as an analyst, you're pulling in data and correlating it, and to do that more quickly is the mission that you're basically on, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, it was when I was a pen tester, red teamer, there was natural time boxes built into projects engagements, right? So you'd say, hey, this is a 2-week project, or I have 1 day to test this web app. And you didn't always have enough time, but you were contracted to work those hours, and you did as much as you can in that limited time. When I got into incident response, it was a little different, because you need to respond quickly and follow the steps of proper incident response. But at the same time, there's moving too quickly, and you could easily make mistakes. So what we found ourselves doing was taking IP addresses and host names involved in instant response and putting them up on a whiteboard. So we jot down, hey, this IP is bad guy 1, this IP is bad guy 2, this machine is intruded upon, and it'd be that big network, right? Like you see in a crime show with threads tied between them.
Yeah.
And at some point that whiteboard got too full. We'd clear it, we'd take a picture with our cell phone, then clear it off and start again. And so then at that point, not only would we go back and check the whiteboard to see if something was new that we saw, but we'd have to check the picture. And on the second picture, it was like, all right, this is not really sustainable. We need to work on our processes. We need to figure out a better way of keeping track. Have we seen this before? Is this new? Have we checked all the proper intel sources to figure out if it's something that the industry is already tracking as badness, or is this a targeted attack? So as that problem got bigger and bigger and compiled, it really did inspire us to create Polarity.
And what's also very interesting, Paul, when I was doing a lot of investigations and there was a network team, and I was teaching them as much about security as I could, and vice versa, they would teach me as much about networking. There would be some kind of incident. And the worst possible scenario, I think, or one of the worst, is when I, as a security engineer, I'd go down a path and investigate something. The network engineer, one of them, would go down a similar path, and then we compare notes, and maybe we got the same result. Either it was something we needed to pay attention to, or I'd compare notes and we go, yeah, that was a rabbit hole. That was just an anomaly, and it wasn't a big deal. And we look at each other and both how much time did you spend on that? I spent a couple hours, and they spent a couple of hours. Now you start adding that together as your team gets larger, right? I think what your platform does is allow us to communicate and feed off of each other's data so that collectively we're saving time. It's not just about one person, but about the entire team.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the same problem a lot when I was government. So I worked as an intel officer, and it's, in the intel community, it is a cliched issue, right? Two analysts both working on the same thing. Mm-hmm. They don't know about one another. And then it always comes back to that you have different pieces of the puzzle.
Yes.
They don't collaborate and communicate. Intelligence failure. Of course, you have the duplication of work as you just described. That's a problem too, a waste of resources. But when it's different pieces of the puzzle, and if they don't connect, that's a big problem. And so for us, we try to figure out how do we solve that in a better way. The current way at the time was force the analysts into a common workflow. So force them to go into some common dashboard or common investigation management platform. So one analyst needs to log in, put their notes in. Second analyst needs to log in, put their own notes in. Hopefully they get connected. If there's 3 analysts, it's 3 actions. If there's 100 analysts, it's 100 actions. So when we built Polarity, we said, well, how can we make it so that each of those analysts gets to use the workflows that they're familiar with and the tools that they like to use, and then we just overlay that information with augmented reality on top of their screen to give them that context and connect those individuals, hopefully, completing that puzzle, if you will. Right.
And I know some people hear the term augmented reality, but really that's what Paul and his team have built, is an augmented reality experience, basically not just in your browser, but other applications on your computer, correct?
Yeah, it's in software, not just browser. So we, being security professionals, we knew that it's important to run on command line, terminal, whether it's PowerShell or CMD or terminal, all those are important. Whether you're Windows, Mac, or Linux, that's important. If you're detonating malware inside of a VM, we need to be able to run right on top of that. So what we set out to do is, hey, let's analyze the pixels on the screen and run computer vision algorithms on those, and then highlight and give that context based on those pixel values. That gives us the ultimate flexibility to really provide context and that awareness everywhere in every tool, not just in a web browser, or not just in the dashboard or the workflow management technology you might be using.
Well, what are some of the newer features you've built in, Paul, that give the analysts some great context and collaboration too?
Yeah, so some of the newer enterprise features has been really kind of giving awareness back to coworkers you should be talking to, and getting those conversations triggered. We're always, ourselves and in the community is always building integrations. And, it's times like this at Black Hat to kind of take a step back and look, hey, Black Hat 2016 is when we actually released and came out of closed beta. And, since then we've been focused on government and enterprise customers. And so now we're kind of circled back and said, all right, how do we give back to the community? We're in level 10 of Jumanji right now. How do we give back to the community and create an edition that they can use for free and give some of that value back? So that's been one of our big, more recent pushes. something we've giving early access to folks at Black Hat and folks who are watching the show right now, trying to get folks early access to our community edition. Get the value of Polarity, get the value of those overlays at no cost.
So the goal is not to just have a trial, but have a community edition with a limited feature set that the community can use completely for free?
That's right. So we had enough of our customers and users who would use Polarity at work, and they say, hey, I'm a researcher at home. Can I use Polarity at home? And, of course we said yes, but it was kind of clear that, hey, there's a big community of researchers, people who care about their jobs, people who like to learn, and, they're working in their spare time. And so we wanted to make sure we had an edition for them. And the other thing that was a catalyst is we surpassed the 100 integration mark. So these are open source projects built on top of Polarity. And I think we're at about 119 now, actually. And so these were built by those users. They're built by customers, partners, and some of them are built by us. And we said, all right, well, with this big of a community-driven effort to build on top of the platform, we really do need to open this up more widely.
That's really awesome. Well, what are some of those integrations, Paul, for our audience? Like, what can they expect if they're trying to, visualize and think of, I've got this thing, it's overlaying on my screen. What kind of information can it tell them?
Yeah, so an integration is basically three things. You define what to recognize on the screen, what actions to take, and what information to overlay. Mm-hmm. So as an example, if you want to recognize a CVE number, check Google or other sources for exploits, and then overlay links to those exploits. You can do that as an integration. If you want to look for an IP or a host name, and then check your asset management database and get the context in the asset, you can do that. If you want to recognize an IP address or file hash and check threat intelligence platforms, whether it's your tip or whether it's a threat intel feed, you can do that. And so basically you define those three things: what to recognize, what actions to take, and what to overlay, and you have an integration.
And so is the idea with the community edition to allow people to supply those integrations and make those freely available to the community as well?
Yeah, we want to get to a state where folks in the community edition can build on top of the platform right now. Right now, it's our enterprise customers are doing a lot of that building, and our partners. So yeah, the plan is to enable the community to also build. Out of the gate right now, they'll get to pick from a set of existing integrations. They'll get to pick 3 different integrations to install. So that could be your various tip platforms or data sources, other data sources. Sometimes it might be just a conversion. Maybe you just want a fast conversion of base 64 to human readable, or epoch epic time to human readable thing.
Oh, super useful. Really 2 super useful things, right? Especially if you're developing or doing CTFs or pen testing, right?
Yep, absolutely.
That's awesome.
And you can chain these things together. You can fire off playbooks. So if you have an orchestration platform already connected to orchestration, maybe you want buttons there to quickly fire off a playbook.
That's awesome. And I love the ability to connect it to more public resources as well as your internal applications as well. I think that's a super important part of the platform, right? Yeah.
So for the community edition, it's able to connect to the public data sets. So the things that are internet accessible, I should say. And with the enterprise edition, obviously you bring the server in-house. So it's an on-prem server, and then you can connect it to whatever you want to connect it to internal as well.
That's awesome. What are some of the differences between the community and commercial versions other than what you've already mentioned?
Yeah, so that's one of the big ones. The on-prem server gives you those connections. The other thing is integration. So we limited the community edition to 3 integrations. The enterprise edition, you don't have that limit. And the other thing that's on the enterprise side that's not in the community right now is annotation. So with enterprise, you can annotate something on the fly. So you can see an IP address, say, hey, I want to keep track of this. You annotate it with your mouse, and then the next time you see it on your screen, it'll show you that annotation that you took.
That's fantastic. And I'm assuming people can go to polarity.io/SW and hit that page, and they're able to submit their information to get a pre-release of the community edition. Is that?
That's right. So for listeners of the show, early access to the community edition. So the actual we're opening it up for Black Hat, so that's Wednesday, Thursday, tomorrow. So be patient, sign up today, but you'll see an email from us shortly after with getting you all set up.
Paul, thank you so much for appearing on Security Weekly.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Glad we didn't lose power. And
right, glad you stayed.
I didn't lose power. I'm on generator, but glad you didn't lose power at Unity Studios.
Glad you stayed with us. And for our listeners, visit polarity.io/SW and get your early access to the community edition. Paul, thanks again.
Thank you, Paul.
More interviews coming up next. Stay tuned.